The boy's name was Ethan. He had a pair of bright, inquisitive eyes that seemed to sparkle with curiosity and wonder. His hair, a tousled mop of brown, often fell into his eyes, giving him a perpetually playful look. Ethan was the kind of boy who could light up a room with his smile, a smile that was as genuine as it was infectious. He was just like any other child, full of energy and boundless enthusiasm. He loved to run around the playground, his laughter ringing out like a melody. The playground was his kingdom, a place where he could be anything he wanted to be, a pirate, a superhero, or even a daring explorer. He loved to play with his toys, ride his bike, and let his imagination run wild. His toys were not just inanimate objects, they were his companions in countless adventures. Each toy had a story, a personality, and a role in the grand tales that Ethan spun in his mind. And spend time with his family. Family picnics were a regular affair, filled with laughter, games, and delicious food. Ethan cherished these moments, the simple joy of being surrounded by the people he loved most in the world. His days were filled with laughter, games, and the simple joys of childhood. Whether it was a game of tag in the park or a board game at home, Ethan's life was a tapestry of happy moments. He reveled in the freedom of his youth, the endless possibilities that each new day brought. Ethan's world was small, safe, and filled with the warmth of love. His parents were his anchors, providing him with a sense of security and belonging. They were always there for him, ready with a hug, a word of encouragement, or a comforting presence. He had no reason to believe that anything could ever shatter the peaceful bubble he lived in. His home was his sanctuary, a place where he could be himself without fear or worry. It was a world where every corner held a memory, every room a story. He was oblivious to the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of his perception, waiting for the opportune moment to seep into his life. The shadows were a distant concept, something that belonged to the stories his grandmother told, not to his reality. The world, as we know, can be a cruel and unpredictable place, even for the most innocent among us. Ethan's innocence was a shield, but it was also a vulnerability. He had no way of knowing that the world outside his bubble was filled with dangers and uncertainties. Ethan lived in a quaint suburban home with his parents and a mischievous golden retriever named Buddy. Buddy was more than just a pet. He was Ethan's loyal companion, always ready for a game of fetch or a comforting cuddle. The bond between them was unbreakable, a testament to the unconditional love that pets bring into our lives. His house was a haven, a place of comfort and familiarity. The living room, with its cozy sofa and warm lighting, was the heart of the home. It was where the family gathered to share stories, watch movies, and simply enjoy each other's company. The walls were adorned with pictures of happy memories, birthday parties, vacations, and Ethan's toothless grin in countless school portraits. Each photograph was a snapshot of a moment in time, a reminder of the love and joy that filled their lives. The scent of freshly baked cookies often wafted from the kitchen, a testament to his mother's love and culinary skills. Baking was a cherished activity, a way for Ethan and his mother to bond. The kitchen was filled with laughter and the sweet aroma of cookies, a place where love was baked into every treat. The living room echoed with the sounds of his father's laughter as they played board games on lazy Sunday afternoons. These moments were precious, a time for father and son to connect and create lasting memories. The games were more than just a pastime, they were a way for Ethan to learn, grow, and feel the love of his family. It was a home filled with love, where laughter came easily and worries seemed to melt away. The bond between Ethan and his parents was strong, a foundation built on trust, understanding, and unconditional love. Their home was a sanctuary, a place where they could escape the outside world and simply be together. Ethan's childhood was a tapestry woven with the simple pleasures of life. He found joy in the little things, the moments that others might overlook. A sunny day in the park, a run through a field, these were the moments that made his heart sing. He found joy in the most ordinary of things, chasing butterflies in the park, their delicate wings a blur of color and movement. Each butterfly was a tiny miracle, a reminder of the beauty and wonder of the natural world. Building sandcastles on the beach, each grain of sand a building block for his dreams. The beach was a place of endless possibilities, where the waves whispered secrets, and the sand held the promise of adventure. And listening to his grandmother's fantastical bedtime stories. Her voice was a soothing melody, weaving tales of magic and wonder that transported Ethan to far-off lands. These stories were a cherished part of his bedtime routine, a way for him to drift off to sleep with dreams of adventure and heroism. He had a vivid imagination that transformed his toys into fearless adventurers and his backyard into a magical kingdom. Each day was a new adventure, a chance to explore, create, and dream. His imagination knew no bounds, and his toys were the heroes of countless epic tales. He spent countless hours lost in his own world, where trees whispered secrets and the wind carried whispers of forgotten tales. The natural world was his playground, a place where he could let his imagination run wild. Each tree, each rock, each blade of grass held a story, a secret waiting to be discovered. His innocence was a shield, protecting him from the harsh realities of the world. His smile was a beacon of hope, a reminder that there was still goodness and purity in the world. He was a symbol of innocence, a light in the darkness. He was blissfully unaware of the sinister forces that lay dormant in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to make their presence known. The shadows were a distant threat, something that belonged to the realm of nightmares, not to his reality. He had no way of knowing that his life, so full of promise and innocence, was about to take a dark and terrifying turn. The future was a mystery, a path that he would have to navigate without the comfort of his childhood innocence. For, unbeknownst to Ethan, a malevolent entity had been drawn to his pure, untainted soul, a demon with eyes as cold as ice and a heart filled with an ancient, insatiable hunger. This entity was a force of darkness, a being that thrived on fear and despair. It had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And it was only a matter of time before this sinister force would make its presence known, forever shattering the tranquility of Ethan's world. The shadows were closing in, and Ethan's world was about to be turned upside down. The innocence of his childhood would be replaced by a harsh new reality, one that he could never have imagined. One ordinary evening, as Ethan was getting ready for bed, he noticed something strange in the reflection of his bathroom mirror. The day had been like any other, filled with the usual routines of school, homework, and play. But as the night crept in, a sense of unease began to settle over him. A fleeting shadow, darker than the encroaching night, flickered behind him. It was so quick that he almost doubted his own eyes. Was it just his imagination playing tricks on him? Or was there something more sinister lurking in the corners of his home? He turned around, heart pounding, but found nothing there. The bathroom was empty, save for the usual fixtures and the soft hum of the overhead light. Yet the feeling of being watched was palpable, sending shivers down his spine. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, he tried to shake off the unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. He told himself that it was just his mind playing tricks on him, a result of too many scary stories and late-night movies. But the image, fleeting as it was, lingered in his mind. A seed of unease planted in the fertile ground of his innocence. He couldn't help but replay the moment over and over in his head, each time feeling a little more certain that what he saw was real. The next day, Ethan couldn't shake off the memory of the shadow. It haunted him, casting a dark cloud over his usually bright and cheerful demeanor. Even as he tried to immerse himself in his favorite toys, the memory of the shadow loomed large. It clung to him like a cobweb, invisible yet ever present. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside his window seemed to whisper of the shadow's presence. He tried to find solace in the familiar comfort of his toys, but even their cheerful colors seemed muted, their plastic smiles strained. The joy they once brought him was now overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. The laughter of children playing outside his window grated on his nerves, a stark contrast to the growing disquiet within him. He envied their carefree spirits, wishing he could join them and forget about the shadow that haunted his thoughts. The world, once a place of wonder and excitement, now seemed tinged with a subtle sense of menace. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every dark corner a potential hiding place for the unknown. As the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across his room, Ethan's anxiety magnified. The approaching night brought with it a sense of foreboding, as if the darkness itself was alive and watching him. He found himself drawn back to the bathroom mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. The mirror, once a mundane object, now seemed like a portal to another world, a world where shadows came to life. He stared at his reflection, his young face etched with a fear he couldn't quite comprehend. The eyes staring back at him seemed different, as if they belonged to someone else. Someone who had seen things no child should see. And then, for the briefest of moments, he saw it again, the shadow, darker and more defined this time, lurking just behind his shoulder. It was no longer a fleeting glimpse but a clear, undeniable presence. This time, there was no denying what he had seen. The shadow was real, and it was watching him. The realization hit him like a cold wave, leaving him paralyzed with fear. A scream caught in his throat, choked by the sheer terror that gripped him. He wanted to call out for help, to run to his parents and tell them what he had seen, but the words wouldn't come. He stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling to the cold, hard floor. The impact jolted him, but the fear was so overwhelming that he barely felt the pain. Tears streamed down his face, blurring his vision, as he scrambled to his feet and ran out of the bathroom. The chilling image of the shadow seared into his mind. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of his bedroom, where he collapsed onto his bed, sobbing uncontrollably. From that moment on, Ethan knew he was not alone. The shadow had made its presence known, and there was no escaping it. It was a constant lurking threat, always just out of sight but never far away. Something was watching him, something dark and malevolent, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed its true intentions. Ethan could feel its eyes on him, cold and unblinking, as he lay in bed each night, too afraid to close his own eyes for fear of what he might see when he opened them again. Nights became a battleground for Ethan. Armed with a small flashlight, he would lie in bed, scanning the room for any signs of movement. The beam of light was his only defense against the encroaching darkness, but it did little to ease his fears. His parents tried to comfort him, attributing his fears to nightmares and an overactive imagination. They assured him that there was nothing to be afraid of, that shadows were just shadows and nothing more. But Ethan knew better. In an attempt to make sense of his experiences, Ethan began to draw. His pictures were filled with dark, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of rooms and behind closed doors. It was his way of confronting his fears, of giving form to the formless terror that haunted him. He showed his drawings to a friend, hoping for some validation, but was met with skepticism. "It's just your imagination," his friend said, laughing it off. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was real. Determined to find answers, Ethan turned to books and the internet, researching shadows and supernatural phenomena. He read about shadow people, entities that lurked in the periphery of human vision, feeding off fear and negative energy. The more he read, the more convinced he became that he was dealing with something beyond the ordinary. One night, in a desperate bid to prove the existence of the shadow, Ethan set up a camera in his bathroom. He hoped to capture evidence, something tangible that he could show to others. As he pressed record, he felt a mix of fear and determination. The footage, when he reviewed it the next day, was mostly uneventful. But then, for a split second, a shadowy figure appeared just as he had seen it. It was blurry and indistinct, but it was there. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the clip over and over, each time feeling a mix of validation and dread. He showed the footage to his parents, hoping they would finally believe him. They watched it with concern, but their skepticism remained. "It's probably just a trick of the light," his father said, trying to reassure him. But Ethan knew what he had seen. The nights that followed were even more restless. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts of the shadow. He felt trapped, unable to escape the presence that haunted him. In a bid to find some peace, Ethan spoke to a school counselor. He poured out his fears, hoping for some guidance. The counselor listened patiently, offering words of comfort and suggesting techniques to manage his anxiety. But deep down, Ethan knew that no amount of counseling could banish the shadow. As days turned into weeks, Ethan's fear began to transform into a steely determination. He realized that he couldn't live in fear forever. He had to confront the shadow, to face it head-on and find a way to banish it from his life. One evening, as the sun set and the shadows lengthened, Ethan stood in front of the bathroom mirror once more. This time, he was not just a frightened boy. He was a warrior, ready to face the darkness that had plagued him for so long. He stared at his reflection, his eyes filled with determination. "I am not afraid of you," he whispered, his voice steady. "You have no power over me." The shadow appeared once more, darker and more menacing than ever. But this time, Ethan did not flinch. He stood his ground, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. Slowly, he reached out to touch the mirror, his fingers trembling. As his hand made contact with the cold glass, the shadow began to dissipate, fading into the darkness from which it had come. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The shadow was gone, and with it, the fear that had gripped him for so long. He had faced his darkest fears and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, Ethan's world began to brighten once more. The laughter of children outside no longer grated on his nerves, and the cheerful colors of his toys brought him joy once more. The shadow was a distant memory, a reminder of a battle fought and won. As he looked out of the window, watching the children play, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He knew that shadows would always exist, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them, and with that knowledge, he was ready to embrace the light once more. The transition into adolescence was difficult for Ethan, a journey fraught with unexpected challenges. Puberty brought with it a wave of complex emotions, a storm he was unprepared to weather. These emotions were amplified by the ever-present dread that clung to him like a shroud, suffocating his spirit. The demon, once a fleeting shadow, grew bolder, its presence a constant weight on Ethan's young shoulders, pressing down on him. Its energy permeated his life, casting a dark pall over every aspect of his existence, leaving no corner untouched. Gone were the carefree days of childhood, replaced by a gnawing sense of fear and isolation that he couldn't shake off. The whispers started subtly, insidious suggestions woven into the fabric of his thoughts, eroding his peace. They urged him towards self-destruction, painting a bleak picture of a future devoid of hope or happiness, a future he dreaded. Ethan tried to ignore them, to cling to the remnants of his former self, but the demon's influence was relentless, slowly chipping away at his resolve bit by bit. Ethan's once bright eyes, now clouded with fear and exhaustion, constantly darted around searching for the source of the whispers, the unseen menace. The unseen menace that haunted his waking hours and invaded his dreams, turning them into nightmares. He saw shadows lurking in the corners of his vision, always just out of reach. He heard his name whispered on the wind, a chilling reminder of his torment. He felt a cold breath on his neck, even in the sweltering summer heat, a sensation that sent shivers down his spine. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving Ethan trapped in a perpetual state of terror, unable to distinguish between the two. Ethan's withdrawal from the world around him didn't go unnoticed, his isolation becoming more apparent each day. His parents, once a source of comfort and stability, became a source of worry and confusion, their concern growing. They couldn't understand the change in their son, the sudden shift from a vibrant, happy child to a withdrawn, fearful teenager, a transformation that baffled them. His once easy laughter was replaced by a strained silence, a silence that spoke volumes. His playful nature buried under layers of apprehension, a shadow of his former self. To them, it seemed like Ethan was slipping away, pulled under by an invisible current they couldn't fight against, a current that was taking their son from them. Time, a relentless tide, marched on, carrying Ethan into adulthood, each passing year adding another layer to his burden. The once bright-eyed boy was now a shadow of his former self, his youthful energy replaced by a weary resignation that seemed to seep from his very bones. The demon, a constant companion, had woven itself into the fabric of his existence, its presence as familiar as his own heartbeat, a dark echo of his soul. Ethan had grown accustomed to the whispers, the shadows, the ever-present sense of dread that clung to him like a shroud, suffocating yet strangely comforting. It was his normal, his curse, his inescapable reality, a life sentence with no possibility of parole. He moved through life like a ghost, unnoticed, unseen, a mere specter in the world of the living. Social interactions, once a source of anxiety and fear, were now avoided entirely, a self-imposed exile from the world. He lived a solitary existence, working night shifts at a desolate gas station on the outskirts of town, a job that suited his nocturnal habits and the isolating nature of his affliction. The fluorescent lights hummed a constant dirge, reflecting off the greasy linoleum floors and the dusty shelves stocked with forgotten snacks and stale coffee, a fitting backdrop to his desolate life. The customers, mostly truckers and insomniacs, seemed to pass through him, their eyes sliding away from his haunted gaze as if sensing the darkness within. He was an anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of their mundane lives, a figure that didn't quite fit. They sensed his darkness, the unseen entity that clung to him, and they instinctively knew to keep their distance, to avoid the void he carried. Ethan was alone, adrift in a sea of faces, yet utterly invisible, a ghost among the living. The nights were long, punctuated by the occasional clang of the gas pump, the rumble of a passing truck, the insistent chirping of crickets outside, a symphony of solitude. Ethan found solace in the monotony, the predictable rhythm of his solitary existence, a small comfort in an otherwise bleak reality. He had learned to compartmentalize, to shut down the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him, to exist in a state of numbed detachment, a survival mechanism. He was a prisoner in his own mind, resigned to a life sentence with no possibility of parole, trapped in a cycle of despair and resignation. One particularly dreary night, a stray cat wandered into the gas station, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light. It was a scrawny thing, all matted fur and wary eyes, clearly having seen better days. Ethan, normally averse to any form of company, found himself inexplicably drawn to the creature's quiet desperation. He coaxed it in with a bit of milk, watching as it lapped up the offering with a grateful purr, a sound that seemed to echo in the stillness. The cat, a ginger tabby with a torn ear and a ragged tail, settled into his life with surprising ease, as if it had always belonged there. It would curl up on a stack of newspapers in the corner of the gas station, its presence a quiet comfort in the otherwise sterile environment, bringing a sense of warmth. Ethan, who had always shied away from human connection, found himself opening up to the feline, sharing his meager meals and quiet moments of contemplation, feeling a bond he had never known. The demon, sensing a shift in Ethan's demeanor, grew agitated, its dark influence waning. Its whispers became more insistent, laced with a note of desperation, trying to regain control. It tried to stoke Ethan's fear, reminding him of the dangers of attachment, the inevitability of loss, and the pain that comes with it. But the cat, oblivious to the unseen battle raging around it, continued to purr contentedly, its presence a soothing balm on Ethan's frayed nerves, grounding him. One night, as Ethan was closing up the gas station, he noticed a figure watching him from across the street, shrouded in mystery. It was a tall, shadowy figure, its features obscured by the darkness, an ominous presence. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest, fear gripping him. The demon hissed in his ear, urging him to flee, to hide, to disappear into the night, to escape the unknown. But Ethan, emboldened by the cat's unwavering presence at his side, stood his ground, refusing to be driven away. The old gas station at the edge of town stood silent, its once bustling forecourt now a ghostly reminder of days gone by. The structure, weathered by time and neglect, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something or someone to break the stillness. The fluorescent lights buzzing with an almost mournful hum, casting an eerie glow that flickered intermittently, as if the very soul of the place was struggling to stay alive. The light, though dim, was the only sign of life in an otherwise desolate scene. The ginger cat was gone, vanished into the night, its purpose served. It had been a silent witness to the comings and goings, a guardian of secrets that the gas station held. Now it too had moved on, leaving behind only the faintest trace of its presence. The faint scent of Ethan's coffee lingered in the air, a bittersweet reminder of the soul that had found solace within those grimy walls. Ethan, with his quiet demeanor and haunted eyes, had been a fixture at the gas station, a part of its very fabric. There was an emptiness now, a void that seemed to echo with the memories of conversations held, of laughter shared, and of silent tears shed. The gas station, once a place of refuge for weary travelers, now stood as a monument to a time that had passed. There was an emptiness now, a stillness that spoke of a presence departed, a story concluded. The night stretched on, the silence broken only by the occasional rumble of a passing truck, its headlights momentarily illuminating the dusty pumps and the weathered open 24 hours sign. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles, noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The wind whispered through the trees behind the gas station, a mournful symphony that seemed to carry the echoes of Ethan's laughter, his pain, his quiet acceptance. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt, connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles, noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles, noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure. The stars twinkled indifferently in the night sky, the moon cast its pale light on the empty parking lot, and the tireless highway stretched out in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt connecting lives both ordinary and extraordinary. But for those who knew where to look, for those who listened closely enough, the gas station at the edge of town held a quiet magic, a subtle hum of energy that spoke of a love that defied death itself. The regular customers, the truck drivers with their weary eyes and tired smiles, noticed the change. They couldn't quite articulate it, but something felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence was more profound. The young man behind the counter, the one with the haunted eyes and the air of perpetual sadness, was gone. They chalked it up to their imaginations, to the long hours on the road, to the strange tricks that loneliness could play on the mind. But as they drove away, their headlights fading into the distance, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, a piece of themselves, a connection to a story they would never fully comprehend. The gas station, once a beacon for weary travelers, seemed to hold its breath, a silent testament to the extraordinary events it had witnessed. The world outside continued, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within that humble structure.